Today I'm going to show you how I would go about it if I were to do an analog style mix, as if the tracks were recorded using analog outboard gear and a tape machine, and I'll be demonstrating it on some drum tracks I've just recorded. There's nothing wrong with digitally recorded tracks, but the truth is for most of us we do prefer the more analog sounding mixes, depending on the genre you're working in. In this case, I have recorded some drum tracks for a hard rock, classic metal type tune. And what I've done so far is just finding some decent levels for the drum kit. As you can hear, they already sound quite good, with the exception of the kick-in mic. All of them were recorded with very clean, modern preamps. So what we're essentially going to do is pre-mixing these tracks before we start a mix. So what we'll be adding is a preamp, emulation, some EQ. For this example I'm going to skip compression, but you can also add that if you want to, and a console emulation. And once we got the basic sound there, we're going to just bounce these tracks and import them when we're ready to start mixing the whole song. You don't have to do that, but it really does help when you start piling on plugins. And this is the way people used to do it. Commit to sounds and work with what you've got when it's time to start mixing them properly. The kick-in mic was recorded with a 1073 preamp. Mine is from Heritage, but it's a very faithful recreation of a Neve preamp. So what we'll be using for this pre-mixing process is Neve emulations. So let's start out with a kick-in here. All of the tracks here are mono, apart from the overheads. So what we'll be using for the preamp and EQ emulations is the Sheps 73 mono plugin from Waves. This is a fantastic Neve emulation. Next up, for the console emulation bit here, we'll be using the Slate digital virtual mix rack and the VCC channel. And we'll set that to Brit N, which is the Neve emulation. And lastly, we're going to need some tape, and for that we're using the virtual tape machine from Slate Digital. Set to 15 IPS, 456 tape, and 2-inch 16 track. For this example, I'm not going to put anything on the master bus. We'll be doing that in the final mix. For that, we'll then be using the VCC mix bus and a master tape emulation. This will do for the individual tracks. What I've done is set up a shortcut here in the toolbar. Copy FX chain from selected track. And we're going to paste that to all of them except the overheads. And for the overheads, we're going to add the same things, except we need the stereo versions of the Sheps 73. We now have all the plugins we're going to be needing. You can already hear quite a difference with the plugins in, and they're not doing anything yet. It's worth noting though that the Slate plugins do add a tiny bit of volume, so that may trick you a bit to begin with. But anyway, let's now go in and start tweaking the settings. We have the kick-in. Not going to be using the preamp on this, as this was already recorded with 1073. But I will be using it on all the other tracks. So now what I'll be doing is some general EQ which you would normally do when tracking through an analog mixer or preamps with EQ on them. This is usually just gentle shaping, no surgical stuff here. We're saving that for the proper mix. And as is the case with especially kick drums and toms, it's always a good thing to pull out a bit of the lower mids, around 360. Let's try that. Yeah, already much better. Still a bit too much sub lows there, but the kick drum is already halfway to where it should be. Let's look at the VCC. And with both the VCC and the tape machine, you pretty much want to average around the 0 dB mark. That way you get a little bit of saturation. Try adjusting the bass alignment on the tape. Sounds good. Kick out next. Both kicks together. Snare top. fairly high pass filter here, but we add a bit beneath it to just focus the low end a bit on the snare. Next we're going to add a bit of snap at about 3.2. You don't need much. 12k shelf. You can add a bit more at 110. Bypass effects. Let's try the snare bottom. I know I'm going to need to pull the high pass up to 300. And mix it in with the snare top. Think we can set the high pass to 160. Pull down some 360. Little bit of a shelf at the top. Yeah, that's a good start. And doing it this way means we can get away with doing as little as possible when it comes time to mix the tracks properly. Very little surgical EQ, less compression, and once we import the other tracks is half mixed already. Next let's try the mono room mic. This is a Bayer M60 ribbon mic. I love those mics. And this is the only one where we're going to add some compression. Many people record them that way, usually with an 1176 with all buttons in. So we're going to try that. Really liking the room sound there. Let's see, we're going to add the Waves CLA76. Alright, hi-hat. And pull out a bit with the low shelf. Don't really need much there. Same thing with the hi-hats. Don't mix them too bright. They'll take your head off. The last thing now is the toms. Let's start with the first one. I'm going to loop that one. Bypassed. You always need to pull out a lot of low mids on toms, as they can get really muddy down there. And that's because they're mic'd very close. There, I think we're done. That's very nice. And the whole kit. that's night and day. And this is what our drums are going to sound like when we start the proper mix with all the rest of the instruments. Make decisions early, get things sounding as good as you can before you start mixing. And I can see myself using this sort of approach a whole lot going forward. Before we start mixing properly, what we then do is render these. That's going to save us a whole lot of CPU power. Select all the tracks, stems, select your tracks, entire projects, find your directory, and you see here, that's going to be 13 files, which is what I recorded. What I do for file name then is add the track number first, the track, which is a track name, same sample rate as the project was recorded in, wave 24 bits, and check this one, tracks with only mono media to mono file, and just click render. And then you'll have them ready to go when it's time for mixing. And I'll be revisiting this one in a later video, so you can see how I do the actual mix on it. Until then, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like and a comment, share it, and I'll see you in the next video.